All right, so welcome everybody. It is Sunday, the 26th of March. Thank you for sharing your Sunday afternoon, morning, or evening with me. And I hope you'll be able to watch this on recording clearly if you're unable to be here live. My name is Frank Clifford. I'm one of the tutors at the LSA. I run the London School of Astrology as well. I'm very hands-on. I'm in Aries with Moon in Virgo, so I like to be doing most of the things myself. I think it's Aries that thinks no one does anything as fast as they should. And I certainly feel sometimes it's easier to do it yourself. All right, so what we're going to be looking at today, we're going to be looking for the first hour at sun sign columns and the second hour at electional. And you know, everything's going to be recorded. They'll be placed in different files. I'm going to show you that in a moment. And don't forget that you can click on, in the Zoom box, you can click on captions or ... more, depending on how big your screen is open. And you can select captions if you want to read the subtitles. As you know, if you've done this before, you know they're not perfect by any means. But they're as good as they get at the moment. All right. So if you go to londonschoolastrastrology.com and sign in or create an account, you can do that at the top right. You'll see the prospectus. We're updating that in the coming week with all the new dates. We're going to be in London again for tarot in September, for astrology in October. But we're also continuing to do everything online. We've got the wonderful Kira Sutherland coming in June. And she's going to be doing a whole weekend on medical astrology, and that's free for all the students who are enrolled in term 3, 103, 203, or 303, or you can go online and have a look at that. But if you're wanting to find the recording of this, and obviously if you're not live, you won't know the instructions, but if you want to recheck the recording, pop to courses. And if you have any trouble navigating the site, you can just click on this video here on the home page. But if you go to courses and you head to tasters or free, you'll find free interpretation sessions and articles. You can click on that, or you may already find that in this area up here called My Dashboard. And we'll be uploading this recording, or 2 recordings, if I remember to press stop halfway through. You'll see the 2 different classes today in there, plus a load of other articles, lots of Q&As, lots of freebies, lots of things that we do that we don't charge for. Some of you will know also that we do a lot of fundraisers, not for the school, but for worthwhile charities. We did a fundraiser for International Women's Day a few weeks ago, 3 weeks ago now, for a charity called, I'm going to have to remember it now, Girls Out Loud. That was it, to help and support young women. And we raised, I forget now, it's about £800 for that. So we're always doing fundraisers. If you've got a particular charity that really needs support and help, then let me know. Always wanting to use what we're doing here at the LSA for some greater good. And I know a lot of charities, money goes in different places and not really to the people. So if you know of any good charities, I'm always on the lookout for ones where £1,000 will make a big difference to them as well. Okay, so you'll find everything here. Let's go back to the screen and the chart, and hopefully you'll all be able to see this. I'm going to turn off my heater all of a sudden. It's hot. There we are. Okay. This is AstroGold. A lot of you will have AstroGold on your phones, and whether you're short-sighted or not, you might find it quite small. The AstroGold is for Mac, but on the phone it's for everything. It's for every tablet, as far as I'm aware. I think, I'm not sure. Let us know in the chat box if it isn't. But I used to teach on Solar Fire, which is the much bigger, more complex. It's got lots and lots of things you can do on it. When I used to teach on PC, but now I teach mainly from home. I use my Mac pretty much 100% of the time. So I got the Astro Gold, which is solar fire for the Mac with less bells and whistles, but it does what I need it to do, and I haven't found myself wanting. So there are lots of other free software out there as well, lots of other different software. Have a look at that in the student extras, if I'm not mistaken. For those of you who are students with us, you'll see a whole list of what we recommend in terms. We had Dan, who works for me, look at all the different software programs to see which ones do certain features, etc. So it's usually an aesthetic thing, and I like the clarity of Astro Gold. And if you're a student, we also provide different codes for you to get 10, 15% off, sometimes 20% off different programs as well. So hopefully that will make a little bit of difference and a bit of help. So using Astro Gold, and you're probably not going to see the windows that open up in a moment, but I tend to click on the select button, and because we're looking at sun sign astrology for the next hour or the next 55 minutes, this is what I would recommend. I'd go to select and I'd click on displayed points, and I would click on planets with no angles. Okay, that's the first thing. Now, if you're not sure how to select that, you can go to preferences here, and let me see if it's going to allow. Oh, here we go. There we go. So you click on preferences, and there are lots of different things you can do here, but you can click on displayed and select what you want displayed, and then call it something. So I've got loads of them here for different things. Sometimes I just want to show the sun and moon. So that's what I select. I save it as something, and then I select it from the list a little bit later. So if you want to just watch the Sun and Mercury cycle and zoom it all the way through the months and the years, you can do that too. If you want to look at the Sun-Moon cycle, you can do that visually too. So I'm going to select what I've got here, which is planets, no angles, because we don't need the angles for what we're doing. And then go back to share here, and you can see there are no angles. What I'll also do is I will click on edit chart. And again, I'm going to show you this. I'm sure some of you know how to do this very quickly, but others, I think, could do with this mini tutorial here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select, instead of equal houses, I use equal houses. We always say at the LSA, use whatever speaks to you, but dare to look at other things as well, even if they put your planetary placements in uncomfortable houses, shall we say. Always good to see what that says about you, the denial of it, and also the placement. Always good to look at that. So click on houses and select 0 Aries, or you can select solar sign, okay? Which means it'll be selected for wherever the sun is. But I'll do solar sign actually, see if that works. There we are. So now my sharing is paused. I need to go back to the main one. Here we go. So now you have a chart for 0 Aries. We're not looking at any angles, etc. Okay, so let me just say a little bit about sun sign astrology. I did columns for, I put it in the email now. I can't remember how long for from about 1997, probably for about 12, 13 years, maybe longer. I can't remember now. And everybody does them now. Back then, we were paid good money for them. And then all of a sudden, the whole went out of that, the bottom went out of that, and the internet came along, really, and everybody's got some sort of comment about what's coming up. They can be extremely useful. If you don't know somebody's birth time, you don't know their ascendant, you don't know anything about their chart, all you do know is their sun sign. Doing solar houses, and I'll explain what that is in a moment, can be extremely useful and insightful. Okay. For example, the solar house means that we take the whole of the first house and make that the sun sign. So we're in Aries at the moment. So for all Aries people, the sun is transiting through their first house. which means the sun is in Aries. Okay? Mercury and Jupiter are there. So the sun, Mercury, and Jupiter today are all in the sign of Aries. Therefore, they are in Aries solar house. Anything in Taurus would be in Aries second house. We've got the moon currently in Gemini. So about 12 hours ago, the moon moved into Gemini, and it's now transiting just for 2.5 days, of course, through the third house of Aries solar houses. Okay. Mars has just moved into Cancer, which means it's just left the solar Aries third house into the fourth house. Okay. And this is how sun sign astrologers will construct the month ahead, the week ahead, the day ahead, very much depending on the time frame they're looking at. Often towards the end of the year, you'll start to read year aheads from astrologers, and they'll be focusing not on the bitty detail of a week or a month. They'll be looking at the major ingresses. So we'll look at a few examples of that in a minute. You'll get a few ideas of how to construct this. We'll look at some examples of how to not only construct the chart so you see what we're doing, but also how to interpret that. And the key really is, even though sun sign forecasts have been around since the almost 100 years now, in England anyway, they were written, somebody wrote, okay, I'm sure everybody's all right. Okay, I'm looking at chat box. I think it was 1930 that the astrologer Naylor, Naylor, wrote a profile of the newly born Princess Margaret Rose. That was the Queen's sister. And then somebody thought, this is so popular, can you do anything? And of course, sun signs, the sun moves into a sign roughly the same day every year for each sign. So for Aries, the sun moves in around the 20th or 21st of March every year. It can depend. Obviously, the timings can change a little bit. They do progressively over the years get a little bit earlier. And so the easiest thing to do, they found in 1930, the astrologer Naylor found it was easier to just give people a list of dates that the sun moved into the signs, and you could look up your forecast for the week, the day, the month, whatever they did back then. And of course, they're most people's introduction to astrology. And you'll often hear criticisms of them. You'll hear, well, they're too generalized. There aren't 12 types of people. Well, there are 12 archetypes in the terms of the signs. We know that. And we know that once we start looking at astrology, we know very clearly that I lost my train of thought. I'm reading the chat box as well. I'm doing too much. Hang on. We know that we have a chart with a sun, moon, ascendant, Mercury. We have lots and lots of detail in the chart. We know that. But they're a great introduction. They speak of the sun, which is about the life purpose, what we're in the process of becoming. And those of you who grew up on Linda Goodman's sun signs will know that when it's written well, it really speaks to sometimes who you are, but mostly who you want to be, who you want to become. So sun sign forecasts based on your sun sign, your star sign, your birth sign, however you call it, where the sun is in your chart when you were born, they speak very strongly to your sense of purpose, what you want to accomplish in the world, what you may want to accomplish for yourself personally in that way. So I don't think of them as rubbish astrology. When they're written well, they can be a few moments for you to reflect on where you're at. Obviously, back in the 70s and 80s, when I was growing up, people in the newsroom or journalists or junior journalists were given the horoscopes to write for just to fill them in as a bit of junk. And you found a lot of journalists ended up being astrologers without knowing very much about it. Of course, there are many people who write sun sign columns in the newspapers, online, that are very good at the subject and they really know their stuff. But back then, many years ago, often they were written by people who knew nothing about it, and it was just a little bit of advice. It was a little bit of a joke. So they didn't always have a great reputation. But I know a lot of good writers who continue to write sun sign columns, who are good astrologers and good writers. So I have a lot of respect for people who write sun sign columns, because it's an art to be able to put the essence of something, whether it's a week, a day, a month, a year, in 30, 50, 100 words, 250 words. Try it sometime. It's tough. It's tough. I know that it would take me a good number of hours to do my columns each week, and I was very grateful that I finished them. I did monthlies and weeklies. I never did dailies. I think I would have gone completely mad if I'd done dailies. I wouldn't recommend doing dailies, but I would recommend, if you're interested in this, to do a month ahead or a year ahead, or to talk about a particular ingress, like Saturn into Pisces or Pluto into Aquarius. They're the big ones that we're facing this month. And learn to craft it. Learn to write something that you feel speaks to that sign. And over the years, the different astrologers that I've met or been connected to, whether it's Jonathan Caner, Patrick Walker, Shelley Von Strunkel, Jane Struthers, many different people who've written columns over the years, what you often hear from them is, write to somebody who epitomizes that sign for you in a positive way. Write encouragingly. Now, instead of prediction, sun sign columns are more about, for me, they were always a chance to be bossy, to be a bossy Aries and say to people, do this on Thursday, make the most of Saturday's ingress or trine from Mercury to Jupiter, whatever it was. It was my opportunity to do things I would never tell a client to just simply do. But in a column, I'd say, Wednesday is a great day for doing this, give it a go. Or it's a time to go back and return to something under a retrograde, whatever it may be. It was a good opportunity to be directive to people and to be bossy. Forgive me for that. So it's never really about prediction. And over the years, when I was writing these columns, often the editor would say, tell us what's going to happen to Madonna, or tell us what, write a little piece about this and that. And I was always resistant. In fact, I think I got fired eventually from one of the weeklies that I did, because I wasn't talking about how to get laid every week. And they ended up bringing a friend of the editors in, who was a tarot card reader, and she ended up doing my column, I think for about a third of the price. So that's what often happens. It's all about money anyway, with newspapers and magazines. But they realized how popular astrology is, and taking it out of a column or changing the astrologer is a big move for a magazine, because of the continuity and the recognition factor. And people do move. Jonathan Caner really proved this, when he moved newspaper many years ago and rejected £1 million a year for the phone line revenue, which at that point must have been a lot more, or at least he had a lot more control. All his fans moved with him, or many of them moved with him. So the astrologers often had a tremendous pull over the years. And the secret to sun sign astrology, as I said, is to write clearly, write positively, get people thinking about what it is they really want to accomplish in those words. And sometimes if it's just for a week or a day, it might just be a momentary connection that somebody makes and that helps. So it can be extremely useful and beneficial. Now, I often say to people, if you're going to read your week ahead, year ahead in a magazine or online, read your sun sign and read your ascendant sign. Read both of those. See what speaks to you most. if you know your ascendant, which is based on your birth time, of course, then you can start off with the ascendant. Many of us don't know that or don't know our birth time, and we just stick to the sun sign. But if you know both, look at both, study both, see what speaks to you, see which really resonates, and you may end up choosing your ascendant sign. Because as you can see in the wheel in front of us here, it is written as though you are not only an Aries, but an ascendant in Aries as well. All right, so we've got the solar sign. I'm just going to move it forward a few weeks, and we can start to see when it moves into Taurus. There we go. Okay. So if we were looking at Taurus, we'd have the whole of Taurus in the first house and the rest of the signs flowing around. So when we were looking at Aries just now, here we go. Every Aries has just had Pluto move into their solar 11th house. This is why if you've read your year ahead, it may talk about the power of friendship. Pluto in the 11th house. It might talk about eliminating certain people from your life. That's a Pluto in the 11th house too. Or finding your group, really connecting to your social group that is meaningful for you in some sort of way. But if you're a Taurus, Sun in Taurus, the chart is configured from the ascendant being Taurus, the whole first house being Taurus. And in fact, all Taurians have had Pluto move from their 9th solar house into their 10th. So they may be reading, and you may have read this too, of a huge transformation, one of the key words that we often read about Pluto, a huge transformation in the workplace. The astrologer might have thrown a bit of Aquarius in and say, well, if there are non-negotiable, Pluto, non-negotiable situations happening at work with technology, etc., see how you can navigate that. But the astrologer would be talking to a Taurian. And generally, the essence of Taurus is one that's fixed earth. It doesn't like change. I used to joke that Taurus doesn't even give change. Bad joke. Sun in Taurus is about that resistance to change or change on its own terms. So if I were writing for Taurus, I'd be thinking about that. I'd know that for the past 4 or 5 years, they've had Uranus in their first house, in their own sign, prompting them to make changes. And now Pluto moving into the 10th, it's obviously going to go back and forth over the next year and a half, but Pluto just in the last few days moving into the 10th would signal more transformation, not so much on a personal first house level, but more on a 10th house, vocational, career, job, boss, long-term goals, long-term commitments, etc. So the good sun sign astrologers speak sign, planet, house, and aspect. And they try to pick out the most essential for the time period they're writing about. Okay? Now, if you read your stars or you read your sun sign column for today, there may be a focus for Taurus on this Moon-Venus conjunction that's happening this afternoon as we speak. Okay? Oh no, this is this is in April, excuse me. So if you're reading it next Sunday, Sunday in a month from now, they might be just focusing on that if it's a daily. But if it's a monthly, they'll probably end up talking to Taurians about Mars moving into Cancer, okay, into their 3rd house, asserting yourself with your voice, maybe talking to family, Cancer, about the things that you want to do. Asserting yourself, Mars, with your voice, 3rd house, in the area of home, family, Cancer, Cancerian stuff. Okay. Now let's just move this forward. It's easier to do this. If you were a Gemini, for instance, then Uranus has been transiting your 12th house for the last 4 or 5 years. Saturn has just moved in to your 10th house, and Pluto has just moved into your 9th. So as I was writing the columns over the years, I actually printed out a blank sheet. I would draw in where the planets were for that month or week ahead, And I would literally turn the wheel and look at Taurus, and then turn it another 30 degrees and look at Gemini and see where the planets fell in that way. With sun sign astrology, most of the planets tend to make bolder statements when they're in the angular houses: the first house, the fourth, the seventh, and the 10th house. Yeah, they just seem to be the big key themes of life. The first house is very much about you and changing your outlook, your style, your approach, your meet and greet function. All of those first house things could even be your physical appearance. The fourth house is to do with home. The seventh house is to do with relationships, interaction with others, with other important people or partners, business partners as well. And the 10th house is your aims, your long-term goals, your career, your boss, all of those things. So I would particularly select ingresses, meaning when the planet moves into that sign and house, of course, particularly for the 4 angular houses. Okay. So let's go back to now. Okay. So remember, this is for the point of view of all Aries people. Yes, it's general, but it's going to tap into the need to explore the solar Aries energy. Okay. Now, we know that Jupiter's been in Aries now for some time. It's rushing through Aries. It will be in Taurus in a matter of weeks. And so for those of you who are Aries, might be reading this and might be reading your horoscopes, your daily or your weekly, or the year ahead, and they'll talk a lot about being more adventurous, getting in touch with the Aries spirit. You'll be hearing that Jupiter in the first house. Some astrologers might even say, be careful about putting on weight, or be careful about overdoing it, spending too much money, being too impulsive. So what they're doing is they're combining speaking to an Aries, first of all, knowing that Aries can be impulsive, can do things without thinking perhaps, and jump in, go into first gear or fourth gear when everything is, when the brain is still in neutral, who knows. So the key with Jupiter moving through Aries, for Aries, will be about embracing new faith, new philosophies, that's Jupiter, but being careful of overdoing it, too much. These are Jupiterian things. So this is what you may hear. Now, if we were to change this, and bear with me as I just adjust this a little bit, I need to edit the chart. I'm going to make it an equal house chart again. And I'm just going to stick with today, but I'm just going to take the chart back approximately, here we go, to, there we go, to 0 Leo. So this is the forecast for today for anybody with a sun in Leo. The whole of the first house is Leo. And of course, the next sign on, therefore the next house on, is Virgo. Yeah? And then Libra comes, and then Scorpio comes. So the cusp is the beginning of that whole sign. Okay. In fact, whole sign houses link very strongly to this solar general principle of looking at year aheads and month aheads, etc. So if we were looking at anybody with the sun in Leo for today, we might focus on Mercury being in the 9th house. Yeah, we might focus on Mars just having moved into their 12th house. But if you're doing a daily horoscope, and I recommend not to do one unless you're paid very good money, it's a lot of work, it's exhausting. And most of the astrologers I know, with a few exceptions, get people to write it for them because it's ongoing, it's without mercy. You may want to just focus on the moon for the day, or the moon's aspects that day, because that's really all that's changing today. But if you're going to look at the week ahead, and for instance, let me just take it a day ahead, for instance. Now, if I were looking at the week ahead from tomorrow, the 27th of March, all the way through to Sunday, for the sign of Leo, this is what I would do. I put 0 Leo on the first house cusp. Everything else is 0 degrees, and each house contains the whole of that sign on the cusp. Okay. And for the week ahead, I might focus on the moon. I might focus on Mercury, where that is, the aspects both of those planets make, and I might focus on Venus and the Sun. I'll just stick to the inner planets for the week ahead, unless there are major ingresses that we've just seen as well. So just to summarize that for a second, if we're looking at just the day ahead, not much is going to change for each sign, just the moon's aspects. And we could end up just drawing from what's happening with Mercury, etc. But it's not going to be specific to that day. If we're looking at a week ahead, we're going to look at the activity of the inner planets, or maybe an ingress if something steps into a new sign from anywhere. It could be Mercury moves sign all the way through to Pluto. But the outer planets don't move sign every day, of course, or every week. And if we're looking at the month ahead, then we might include new moons, full moons as well. And I used to print off this blank wheel, stick in the chart, and then I'd also add where the new moon and the full moon was that month as well. And you would pay less attention, of course, to the actual moon position, because in that whole month, the moon's going to be everywhere. It's going to move through the whole zodiac. So when I was doing monthlies, I just focused on the planetary ingresses, the new moon, the full moon, and any major aspects that were going on with the inners to each other, or the inners to the social or outer planets. Okay. So if I were looking at the week ahead here for Leo, one of the things that we can see is happening early week is that Mercury is conjunct Jupiter in the sign of Aries. Now that's going to be for everybody, of course, but depending on your sun sign, it'll be in a different solar house. Okay. So I'm going to just draw on the screen for a second. Okay. So if you're taking it from the point of view of Leo here, then it's going to be in Leo's 9th house. However, if you can turn your head just for a moment, and if say you were looking at the sign of Cancer, and that was the Cancer's 1st house, this would be Cancer's 7th house, anything in Capricorn. And therefore, instead of the 9th house, we would have this Mercury-Jupiter conjunction happening in the 10th house for all Cancerians. Now, I could adjust this quite easily, but I want you to be able to just play with this idea of moving it around or just twisting your neck a little bit and seeing how we turn the wheel, okay? Now, if we clear that, and we start to look at Virgo, we could turn the wheel to 0 Virgo, or we could just put Virgo and put 1st house here. And then the opposite sign of Pisces would be the entire 7th house for Virgo. Okay, so this would be Virgo's week ahead. And this special conjunction that I've listed happening early this week would be in Virgo's 8th house. Okay. So if you're a Virgo sun sign and you've read your week ahead, you might start to hear the astrologer talking about Mercury Jupiter, which could be about exploring new ideas, Mercury Jupiter, or running with an idea. That's an Aries thing, isn't it? Rushing with an idea, getting spontaneous ideas. But it's in Virgo's 8th house. And the 8th house, depending on how you see it, can be the house of mystery, the house of going deep. It could be an opportunity to explore your own psychology. So take a look at a week ahead. If you've got a newspaper, if you've got a magazine in front of you that looks at the stars for the week ahead, start to read it, start to detect what the astrologer has said about that. They're not going to pick up everything. They've got 30 words, 50 words maybe, and they're going to just stick to something, or they may continue to look at a theme they've been looking at for the past few weeks and really saying, now what I've been talking about for the past few weeks, now's the chance to really go for it. They might be talking about that Mercury Jupiter. They probably are for the week ahead. Okay. If you're doing a month ahead, of course, you're going to be looking at other stuff, or the year ahead, you'll be looking at the major ingresses of Jupiter and Saturn, or major aspects that happen for those as well. So depending on your window of time, there are certain things that are going to be more important. And the year ahead would, of course, for example, the year ahead for 2023, of course, would mention the importance of Pluto moving into Aquarius for each of the signs in each of those respective houses. And it may talk about Jupiter moving into Taurus, or from Aries into Taurus, and certainly Saturn moving from Aquarius into Pisces. Yeah? But they may not talk about much else. That may be the theme of the year, plus a few eclipses, maybe important full moons, new moons, etc. Okay, let's just clear that for a minute. So also happening in the coming week, I think, I need to check this out, is that Venus is coming to conjunct Uranus in the sky for everybody. Okay, so if you want to understand what that means, have a look at the newspapers that day. That will give you the big headlines of what's happening in the week and week ahead. But depending on your sun sign, it's going to be occurring in a different solar house from other people. For Leo, of course, the whole house, first house is Leo, and therefore Mars has just moved into their 12th, and this conjunction will happen in their 10th house. So what could that be? Does anybody want to write in the chat box and have a think about what a Venus-Uranus conjunction might be in Taurus? Yeah, in the 10th house. What might you advise somebody? Have a go. We can read them out, and don't be afraid of saying something that sounds silly, as long as you use the energies or the descriptions of those planets. So Tiasha says, disruptive relationships at work. Yes, it could be something sudden happening at work for Leo. It could be about the boss, the money at work. Oh, okay, wow, there are lots of coming through. Thank you for that. Okay. Unexpected offer, yes. Unexpected financial offer that feels like a out of the blue gift. Thank you, B. Breakup of relationships, says Candice. Well, certainly something I wouldn't put in a column. Then you get 1/12 of the population really browned off at you for saying that. But it might be, we might want to say a breakthrough or a revelation in relationship. But for Leo, it's in the 10th house. So it might be a relationship with the boss, or a relationship at work. Do you see? That's how it might go. If it were in the 7th house, which of course it would be for Scorpio, if we take Scorpio, that whole area is their first house, and therefore anything in Taurus is in Scorpio's 7th. So Scorpio this week are having, I wouldn't say relationship breakdowns, but maybe breakthroughs. It could be a surprise revelation about money. But again, instead of predicting that, we want to say something positive. We want to say to all Scorpios this week, take a look at how you can do things differently with your partner, or approach dating differently for single people. The first ever column I wrote was for people over 60. And anytime I mentioned sex, the editor would take it out. And I thought, well, I'm sure people over 60 have sex. I'll let you know in about 10 years. But it was a crazy thing. They got rid of any reference to sex, and often any reference to career. I would say somebody's job, because it was catering to retired people and etc. But nowadays, that was 25 years ago when I wrote my first column. Nowadays, people don't retire at 60, and they certainly don't retire from life, even if they retire from work at that age. So times have changed as well. And of course, these days, everybody's super sensitive about how you phrase things. So we always have to write these columns, or I would, going back to something, I would have to write it very carefully. I'd have to write it with an awareness that people are ready to cancel at a moment's notice. Okay, so let's just take that out for a second. Let's have a look at some of your other comments. Yes, unexpected offer for career to leap into something new. Beware temptations outside your established relationship. Oh, okay. that would be a warning of sorts. Creative innovations at work, unexpected pay rise. Yes. Now, again, if we're going to be a sun sign astrologer that people want to read, and we say that and it doesn't happen to most of them, they're going to lose faith in us. So we might say, push for that instead of promise it. Do you see? And there's a reason why I don't write sun sign columns anymore, you know, because I'm busy with the school, I'm busy with writing. But years ago, when I was offered my first sun sign column, I was very snobbish, very snooty about it, and thought, do I want to do it? Because they're given such a bad reputation back then. But I learned so much about writing, and I learned so much about how to describe planetary combinations or planets moving into new signs or new houses. It taught me a huge amount how to say it succinctly, but also how to think about what those combinations, how they could be phrased in 50 words or 90 words. Opening new unexpected doors, thank you. Change your job to something you love. That's interesting, isn't it? Venus, Uranus, yes. Or find something that you really love in your work and hold on to it. Do Taurus, hold on to it. Don't let it go. Yeah, that's how you do that. Over the years, when I was doing my columns, I trained a lot of other astrologers. At that time, a bit later, I was running the school, but over the years, a number of students or friends have had columns or begun writing columns. And I would say to them, just phrase it well and find a phrase that really encapsulates that, and encourage people to do that this week or this month. Don't promise it, encourage them to do it. Because as we know, astrology is not about prediction. Whatever people like to hook onto it or use their reputation and they get their money for being a predictor. It's really about encouraging people to actively participate in their chart, in the cosmos, in the world around them, but to come from a heart-centered place. That's the way I see astrology, at least. Okay, what else have you said? Sudden work relationship, surprise connections in the career, sudden romantic meeting, disruptions for finances, work involved. Yes, now, if you're talking to a fixed sign like Leo, talking about sudden change, you have to say it carefully. Yeah, a bit like talking to Taurus, a bit like talking to any of the fixed signs, Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, Aquarius. Try to encourage them that change is coming and to do it on their own terms, to be the slow instigator of the change. That's how I would speak to any of the fixed signs. The mutable signs love change, don't want to feel like they're going to be stuck with something. Yeah. So the psychology of what we know about the signs based on their element, their modality, is really going to help us to speak to that sign with that other person in mind. So when I was writing them, I would think, okay, so who's the Aries I really want to speak to right now who's going through this? Or is the epitome of what I want to say? Or maybe there are go-getting Aries, or maybe they're one that hasn't found their Aries energy. So what would I say to them? And then I think, sit there and think, okay, what's happening for Taurus this week or this month? And I sit there and I think, who do I know that that epitomizes Taurus? How am I going to say it that they'll hear it in a way that feels encouraging? Christina says, an affair with the boss. Okay. Innovative ways to make more money, spontaneous shopping. You see, I think half of this is what you're projecting onto it, because what you need to do this week, I'm pretty sure. Kimberly says sudden raise, pay rise, pay cut, all of those things. Okay, lovely. And sudden woman boss action in the career. Okay. All right, you're lots of ideas. You're getting it, and that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to clear these for a moment. I'm going to move around and I'm going to just take it back to Taurus. Now, normally, what I would do for the week ahead is I would look at the planets for exactly midnight starting the week. So if it was starting from Monday, I'd look at the exact planets for midnight. Only the moon is going to change much during that day, but I would start things at midnight. But what you're seeing, because I'm tweaking things to get back to the right ascendant, we're looking at different times, so the moon is changing a little bit. I hope you see that. But normally I would find out where everything was for a particular moment, and that would be the beginning of the day for the week ahead or the month ahead. I'd look at the first. We can do that in a moment. So I'm just going to take it back. So this isn't the real beginning of the day, but we're speaking to Taurus now. In fact, if I move it back seconds, we can get that Pluto where it should be in the 10th house. Oh, just a second. There we are. Okay. All right. So this is what a Taurus forecast would look like for the week ahead. Okay. So what would I do for this? I'm going to highlight this. So we know for the week ahead, we're not going to talk about Uranus. It's been in Taurus's first house for a number of years. We might bring in Pluto if we haven't mentioned it last week, because that's the big one. Or we might simply talk about this Venus-Uranus conjunction happening in the week ahead. We might talk about Mars moving into Taurus's third house. And we certainly might talk about the Mercury-Jupiter in Aries. Now, what I found over the years that talking about certain houses is easier than others. The first house is great. You can give people an idea of changing their look, changing their style, viewing things differently, learning from other people how to see themselves in a new light. I might say a little bit about that. I might say, Taurus, indulge yourself. What a great word for Taurus, giving them permission to indulge themselves. Indulge yourself in a change of style this week, particularly on whichever day it was. Let's have a look. I'm going to look on, where does Venus gets to 16 Taurus on Friday. Yep, Thursday, Friday. Usually say it the day before to give them a bit of a chance to get it done, particularly if the actual aspect happens at midnight. No one's going to go around to a store and expect to find it open at that time. So I usually say the day before. So I might say, look, think about changing your style this week, particularly on Thursday. Do a bit of Thursday late night shopping. For instance, we know that in England, the shops stay open late. Treat yourself, indulge. We know Taurus is often about sensuality and cashmere or clothes that they can stroke and touch and feel. You know, there's a sense of indulgence there, which you might want to refer to. Or you might not. You might think that's completely frivolous and you would never speak to a Taurus like that. Totally up to you how you want to do that. Now, as I mentioned a bit earlier about Mars in Cancer in the third house, the energy there has shifted. Now, we know that Mars has just left Gemini, so it's just left the second house for all Taurians. So the last period, in fact, because Mars went retrograde in Gemini at the end of last year, Mars has been in Gemini for a long time. In fact, Mars moved into Gemini in the middle of August. So I might even say this week, or I might have said last week, you've had a 6-month period here where Mars has been pushing you to achieve more, to earn more, to go after things. And remember, it's been in Gemini, so I might say, you know, juggling financial options or juggling 2 different opportunities for financial progress or development, something like that. So I'd want to use that energy of Mars, the driving, impatient or productive energy, the need for excellence in Gemini, juggling, communicating, connecting with people. in the second house. I might have said might have said to them back in August, for the next 6 months, really push to get your voice heard in your work and get paid handsomely for it. Or think of ways that you can use your Gemini, your voice, or your writing skills, your communication skills to make money over the coming 6 months, to push that forward, to let people know what you do. Show people your dexterity, Gemini, your skills in communication, your skills in juggling numerous projects, multitasking. That's a great phrase for Gemini. You see? Now, last week I might have said this 6-month period is coming to an end. It's time now to put your energy, Mars, into expressing your needs in the family or your needs at home. Do you hear that? Expression still with Gemini, 3rd house now, but in Cancer, we're talking about the need to express. Cancer, 3rd house, expressing that. If there are family arguments, Mars in Cancer, but in the 3rd house as well. Their family arguments, find new ways to communicate with people that are holding on, Cancer, to past problems. Something like that. I don't know. Again, have a look at your week ahead and look at what astrologers have said about Taurus. They might be alluding to this Mars in Cancer, of how important it is to express your feelings at home, or go back and talk to your mum or talk to the family. And of course, we can give advice, which we don't do when we're doing consultations. We can give advice and say, give it a go back and reconnect with the family. Mars in Cancer is about that sense of family, but also the past. So lots of different ways that we can phrase that. Okay, let's see if anybody else got any comments or... and Chuta, I think it is, says, do you take into consideration the sunrise at the beginning of the day? No, because I'm not looking at the ascendant, not looking at the real houses of the time. I'm speaking generally to what's in the sign and then putting those signs in particular houses based on the sun sign. So the reality of the day, we'll be looking at this very soon in the second half in terms of electional astrology. That's when you start to tweak things and make sure you've got the right ascendant. Here we're just putting the sun sign in the whole first house, and we're just looking at what's going on that day. I tend to start at midday so I don't miss anything. Okay. Here we go. Emmy says, I'm electricity and beauty treatment, so literal at the moment. Taurus rising. Okay, not sun in Taurus, but Taurus rising. As I said earlier, you can do either. You could use your ascendant sign if you know it, or simply put your sun sign in there. And instead of doing what I did originally back in the 90s and just think all sun sign astrology was a waste of time, I realized how helpful it is to reconnect to the solar principle on a very simple level. Yeah. So, for example, and this comes back to a point I was going to make a few minutes ago, certain houses are easier. So the first house is about the self-expression. We can talk about money and finances and building those in the second. Third house, easy to talk about, finding your voice, local community efforts, siblings, etc. Again, try not to say your brother or your sister or your sibling is doing this and this and this. A lot of people don't have them. So the skill with writing these is to say things in a way that encapsulates the heart of the forecast without being too specific. Now, and that's not just a get out clause, it's a skill, because we're wanting to say something useful to the person. But if we say something like, speak to your boss, and they're like, well, I work for myself, or I don't have work at the moment, that's not necessarily helpful. So we might rewrite it in a way that's about going after what you want at work, looking forward to making commitments or plans at work, something like that. We might change the focus instead of being specific about a person that may not exist in the reader's life. Okay. Fourth house is easy to talk about. Fifth house, the sixth house, the seventh. Now, the ninth, the 10th, the 11th, all of those we can talk about. The two difficult houses can be the 8th and the 12th. In 30 words, you may not want to talk about digging up your psychology and going deep and looking at trauma and of the 8th or the 12th house. But you might want to say, get out that diary, explore how you were feeling years ago. Maybe if Jupiter moved into the 8th house, I might say to the month ahead person, whoever that was, whatever sign that was, go back 12 years and have a look where you were. Celebrate what you've achieved. Make a list of what you still haven't achieved. You can play with that. But the 8th house and the 12th house are difficult to describe. And that's because their meanings are deeper and not on the superficial level of writing a sun sign column. So I tended to find that I would avoid writing about both of those. But when I had to, I would try to talk about going deep with the 8th house or letting go. You can't talk to people about hospitals and mental asylums and prisons when you're talking about the 12th house. They'll never read you again. But what you can talk about is relaxation time, time out, time away. And for Taurus at the moment, with the Sun, Mercury, and Jupiter in the 12th, it might be about just spending some time alone, coming up with new ideas, just helping them percolate. That's what I might say to Sun in Taurus or Taurus rising people. And yeah, Christina mentions that as well. I might just say, look, put your energy, I might say something energetically, because it's Aries, into thinking of ideas of holidays for the future. Mercury, Jupiter. Now's a great time to plan stuff where you can really let go in the summer. Mercury, Jupiter, planning a holiday, thinking of the detail, or spontaneously going off for a 3-day break if possible. Or again, that may not be possible for everybody. It might be about reading or watching something that takes you away from it all. The 12th house is a place of retreat. I might say, go read a book or binge on Netflix, something adventurous and fun and exciting, and lose yourself. Yeah? So that's how I might deal with the difficult houses, the ones that aren't so easy to pin down. But the rest of them, we know if you know your keywords for the houses, you'll be able to come up with something useful for everybody. Okay. Now, B says, communicate your value to others on Venus Day by honoring the goddess within, treating yourself to physical pleasures. Yes, yes. Now, you've got a particular style, B, that might speak wonderfully to people that want to honor their goddesses, the feminine principle, etc. You know, and it's true. Most people who read their columns are women. And most people reading their columns want to know that next week is going to be a little bit better, that there may be challenges, but here's what's to do, the best thing to do. Here's how to navigate that, for instance. So if you are dealing with, for example, I don't know, something like a Mars, say in a few weeks, 6 weeks from now, Mars is going to oppose Pluto in the sky. That's going to be for everybody. How are we going to say that in a way that is useful for people, that doesn't scare them? Yeah, so let's move that forward for a second, and then I'm going to just see if you've got any questions about the method. Let's just move that forward a few weeks. Oh, let's have a look. Okay, it's going to change the angles for a moment because here we go. So, all right. Now, if we change that to 0 Aries, there we go. No, it's not done. Yes, there we go. So for an Aries, remember we put the whole of the sign. So if you're an Aries, you go from, you put Aries in the first house. Mars is opposing Pluto on the 22nd of May. So just before then, actually, a day or so before. So in your forecast, you'll be reading about this energy. But what are you going to say that's useful? Now, for an Aries, it's going to be in their 5th house and the 11th house. There may be some sort of non-negotiable Pluto confrontation between partners, friends, children, what you want to do, what other people want to do. It might be very willful, it might be dramatic, etc. But you have to say it in a positive way. You might say, if there's been a confrontation brewing, this is a good time to not let your pride get in the way. Mars, Pluto. Now that's for all of the signs, yeah, particularly the ones that got lots of pride, like the fire signs. But you know that it's going to be a standoff in the sky for everybody, all 8 billion of us. But depending on our sun sign or rising sign, if you use that instead, it's going to fall into a particular solar house. For Aries, it would be the 5th house. Yeah. Let's just put this in for a second. Okay, so it's going to be Aries 5th house. If you're a Taurus and it begins in the 1st house here, it'll be in a Taurian's 4th house. So it may be a battle with authority at home and work. Maybe the boss is wanting too much time, or there's somebody at home needing more attention. Again, we're going to be advising people in that simple forecast to be aware of the energies and to navigate them positively, not to be dreading the week or thinking something terrible is going to happen. Yeah. Now, you'll notice, of course, as we move through the signs, each sign, it gets closer to the sign. So for Gemini, that would be their 1st house. This conjunction, this opposition, excuse me, is happening in their 3rd house. If you're a Cancerian, the opposition is happening in your 2nd. Okay, and that's how, so you can turn the wheel if you like, or print it out, write it up, or you can do one thing that I would recommend. A diva on steroids, says Christina. Okay. All right. So what I'm going to show you is you can, on solar, on Astro Gold, and I'm sure on Solar Fire you can do it, you can click on Sheets. Okay. And I'm just going to share this page with you. Okay. And you can see all sorts of sheets that they prepared for you. One of them is sun sign wheels. Hey, now this is exciting, isn't it? So if you've got this program, and before you get it, get the discount. Also, there's a wonderful woman called Rhonda in Australia that will do tutorials for you. Have a look at that, or email me if you've not got access to this, to the discount or the information about that. But I love this. You can print these out. I don't know how small they'll be actually when you finally print them out, but at least you can see them based on each perspective. So here, I'm going to see if I can zoom in. Not that I can see that I can. Okay. All right. But here they are based on each of the sun signs. Okay. So we can see that for Aries, Jupiter will move into their 2nd house when it moves into Taurus. For Taurus, it would be their 1st house. For Gemini, it would be moving into their 12th house. For Cancer, it would be moving into their 11th. For Leo, it would be moving into their 10th, etc. Okay, so that can be a useful thing to print out or to at least to look at. But don't forget to set your place and time. Do it at the beginning of the week if you're doing a week ahead, and do it for 0 hours. And if it's a week ahead forecast, you won't be worried too much about the moon, but you'll be looking at the inner planets and the aspects they make. And here we can see that on the 22nd of May for that week, there's not only a Mars-Pluto opposition, but they also are in a T-square to Mercury-Jupiter. So you might be reading all about that in that week coming up in May. All right, so I hope that's given you an introduction to where you may want to start with the sun sign columns. But don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to just combine what you know, to say something positive, to say something fruitful, hopefully positive and helpful in that way. I'm going to have a look to see if If are there any questions? Yes, Sophie, yes, I would mention the T-square, definitely. I hadn't seen that just in that moment. Yeah, play with that and play of how best you can say it in a way that is, as I say, encouraging for them to participate in. And remember to talk to each sign as though you know that sign, or you've got somebody that epitomizes that sign that you're speaking to. Yeah. And the final point is you may want to use the chart ruler or the sun sign ruler. So for an Aries, we know that Mars is going to be particularly important. So you'll often read in your horoscopes, your ruler Mars is doing this today, or watch out for your ruler Mars, that's because it's X, Y, and Z. So think about the planetary ruler. Think about retrogrades. The Mercury retrograde is a common one we can all fall back on. That's about returning, going back to things, reconnecting. Anything with an RE in front of it, a re, will help people understand that, depending on the sign, depending on the house it's in for each particular sign. Okay, so I hope that's been useful. Can you recommend something that isn't solar fire? Not off the top of my head, but go into the LSA portal. If you're a student, you can go to student extras and have a look at what we recommend. If not, email me and I'll do my best to unite you with a list of what to do. But I would Google and I would have a look at the platform you need it, Mac or Windows, whatever it may be, and have a look at what looks aesthetically pleasing, and make sure you pick a program that can move the wheel around like this. Yeah, so you can create a new chart, you can spin it around an hour or a week or a day. You need something that's going to be a real motion type of opportunity. Amanda says, for the month ahead, do we set the date for the start of the month? Yes. Yeah, but again, with a month, you're not going to be looking at the moon, and the sun is very predictable that month. But what you will be looking at are planets that move into new signs, which of course will be new houses for each of the signs. And you'll be looking at some major aspects, conjunction, square, opposition. Okay, all right. How can we bring up the planetary settings you have at the base of your page in AstroGold? Do you mean these ones down here? I think they appear naturally, but if they don't, let me know. I've always seen these down here appear naturally. If not, have a look at the preferences. Click on there and take a look at how to style your chart. Some of you may prefer a wheel that looks more like this. Let me take a look. That's more like that, for instance, where you can see each of the spools, etc. Yeah, you may prefer that. Again, you can choose. Most programs will give you all sorts of preferences. All right, I'm going to end it there. Thank you very much. I hope that's been useful. What I'm going to do is stop the recording.